Good morning. I'm going to go ahead and say Happy Thanksgiving. I'm probably not going to see most of you guys for Thanksgiving. This is the time where everybody goes and does things, or people come and they still do things, and there's traveling and all kinds of stuff that happens. But I'm glad that you guys were willing to come and spend Sunday with us. Maybe before you guys start going and doing all kinds of the traveling and all the chaos that happens around these particular holidays that are coming up here in the next week and in the next month or so. So I'm glad you guys are able to join us as we continue our new sermon series that we started last week called Simon Says. So if you were with us, you might hopefully remember what we started looking at. We looked at when Simon Peter first becomes a disciple, when he first decides that he's going to go in and follow this guy named Jesus. And this whole sermon series, we are going to be looking at Simon. We are going to be looking at some of the things that he says, some of the things that he does. We're going to be looking a little bit about, or looking at the issues where sometimes he gets it right, sometimes he gets it wrong, and I believe that Simon is a very good example for people like you and people like me. Obviously, a lot of people, they look at the Bible and they're looking at Jesus and they're like, every Christian should strive to be like Jesus. Yes, that's true. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not going to be the only preacher probably on stage to stand up here and be like, don't be like Jesus, be like somebody else. That's not me. That's not what I'm about. But I think that if we're just being honest, when it comes to looking at characters in the Bible, oftentimes we find ourselves relating a lot more to the disciples who get it wrong than Jesus, who is like perfect and, doesn't make mistakes. I think sometimes as we are walking through life and we're like, man, I just feel this kind of way about this subject. And there's always the little, bracelets and stuff that say, what would Jesus do? And stuff like that. And we should look at those kinds of questions and we should think, what would Jesus do? But sometimes it helps to look at some of the disciples who they mess up and they make mistakes. And if you remember from last week, we looked at how it's okay to not be perfect and that Jesus isn't looking for us to be perfect. He's looking for us to be faithful with the things that he gives to us. He's not asking for us to be perfect, to have it all figured out, to clean our lives up before we come to him, to humble ourselves and to, be perfect before we follow him. That's not what Simon did. That's not what any of the disciples did. Jesus came to people who he knew were broken, who he knew were imperfect, and he still called those broken, imperfect people to follow him. And that's the calling that he gives to us as Christians today. That it's not about how good we are, it's not about how well we perform, it's about how faithful we are going to be to him, to his message, to his will for our lives. And so we're going to continue to look at the life of Simon. We're going to continue to look at some of the things that he gets right, some of the things he gets wrong. Today we're going to be looking at one of the things that he gets right. But before we jump in, I want to ask a question. What's your plan? What's your plan? What even comes to mind when I say that? And it's not necessarily, I don't want to know like your 5 to 10 year plan, the whole like business mindset kind of thing. But what is your plan? Maybe it's your plan for life. Maybe you're looking at where you want your life to be in the next 5 to 10 years, and you're like, I have this plan. Maybe it's, some of you, this is going to get kind of morbid, but we're going to do it anyway. Maybe you're planning on what life is going to look like when you're not here with us anymore. Maybe you're that kind of person. There's all kinds of insurance companies out there who are always like, you see it on TV all the time on like, do you have a life insurance plan, blah, blah, blah. And it's essentially, do you have this plan for when you're no longer here to take care of your family? What is your plan? Maybe, what is your plan for Thanksgiving? What is your plan for when you're going to go and spend Thanksgiving with family? Maybe you have a backup plan. Any of you guys backup plan people? Where it's like, if this doesn't go correctly, we're doing this instead. And if that doesn't happen, any like plan A through Z kind of people, like if this, then this, if not, then this, if not, then this. I tend to be that kind of person, which I know you probably don't think I'm that kind of person because I'm the kind of person who procrastinates a lot. But because I'm a person who procrastinates a lot, I have to assume that things aren't always going to go according to the way that I've planned them out because I'm planning them the day before it's supposed to happen. So, for example, Thanksgiving, it's coming up this Thursday. I have a plan. But you can't always rely on plans to go according to plan. My plan, go down to Fort Leonard Wood, spend Thanksgiving with one of my friends who's going through AIT, who's going to be alone. He doesn't have family. His wife is out in South Carolina. His sister and family, they're going to be in Iowa for Thanksgiving. I am 1 hour away from where he's at. My plan that I started establishing 3 weeks ago, I'm going to come, I'm going to have Thanksgiving with you. So imagine my surprise when yesterday I'm talking to him because he got an on-post pass, and I'm talking to him, and I'm like, yeah, man, like, I'm going to come, I'll have Thanksgiving with you. My girlfriend even said that she's going to come. You'll be able to meet her, and his friends that I'm also meeting are like, hey, are we going to be able to, like, be on post? Like, do we get passes for that? And I've been telling him, you need to ask. And he goes, I don't know. I need to ask. This is yesterday. We are past the planning stage. Like, I need to know because my mom, she said, if you're not going to Fort Leonard Wood, you're coming here. Guess when that trip has to happen? Tomorrow. So my mom might be finding out the hard way that I might not be doing either because it's too late to be making this plan. But I'm the kind of person where I was like, well, what's the next step? And so obviously the next step, he doesn't get an on-post pass. I'll be spending Thanksgiving here. We'll be doing the Thanksgiving thing. I know they did it last year, and from what I remember hearing and seeing, it was a good turnout and it was a good time. So if that doesn't happen, I'll be here. Me and my girlfriend will be here. We'll be having Thanksgiving here. Like, I am a backup planner because I've quickly learned that things don't always go according to plan A. But here's the thing. I started doing some research, and I don't know about you guys. I'm very big into, like, the leadership and, like, the business books and all the self-development stuff. Like, I consume that stuff. It's a bad habit. I listen to the podcasts, all that fun stuff. And one of the things that I came across was that sometimes it's actually best not to have a plan B. It's best not to have a plan B, and that terrifies somebody like me because I'm like, well, what happens if plan A doesn't happen? But they say it's best not to have a plan B or a safety net because subconsciously, when you have a backup plan, it can cause you not to fully commit to plan A. Because subconsciously you think, well, if this doesn't go according to plan, at least I have this. And that's when we get into the deep waters. Right? Like, now we're taking off the floaties when we get into the deep end of the pool. Because you're like, well, what if I drown? Right? That's, some of you guys, you're older generation. How many of you guys learned how to swim the hard way? You know what I'm talking? I didn't even have to clarify what that meant. You knew. You knew that there were no floaties when it came to learning the hard way. It's like, all right, here we go. Like, we're not talking about, like, let's get in the kiddie pool. We're talking like, there's the 12-foot, section. Boom, in goes the child. Well, he's either going to learn how to swim or he's not. Or she. Some of you guys, you knew that. Not me, maybe this is where I became the backup plan kind of person. I was like, Mom and Dad took me to like the swim lessons, and I had the little floaties, and they're like, just hold on to the little floaty thing and just kick your legs. That was me. There was no like, throw them into the deep end and let's see what happens. That wasn't a me thing. But some of these studies, they've shown that when you have that safety net, it causes you not to fully commit to plan A. Again, like I said, I read and I listen to all of these like self-help kind of books and stuff. And I recently started going through an audio book, which never in my life did I ever imagine I'd be bringing up 50 Cent, the rapper, in a sermon, but here we go. That's just, welcome to who I am as a rapper. Or not as a rapper. I'm not a rapper. Don't put that on me. Everybody's going to be like, you got to rap next Sunday. It's not happening. Welcome to who I am as a preacher. He wrote this book, and it's like this business kind of model book. It's called Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. And he recently went through this little segment where he was talking about how some people, when they get comfortable, they don't commit. And he's a big name person, so he's like all around like the big name people. And he was talking about one of the fights that he was at with Floyd Mayweather. So I don't know if any of you guys are into boxing. Maybe you know Floyd Mayweather. Great fighter, undefeated, never been beaten. And 50 Cent was talking about how he was like backstage, getting ready for this fight. And he was watching Floyd Mayweather. And he said that Floyd just seemed too calm. He seemed too calm getting ready for a fight where somebody's about to try to punch him in the face and beat him up so that, he can win. And he was like, he just didn't seem on edge. He seemed a little too laid back about it. And so he said they were walking to the ring, and as they're approaching, right before, they're like getting the gloves on, the hooded jacket things are like coming off. He said he whispered something in his ear, which some of the words I can't repeat, but he said that part of the thing that he said to him to help get him in the zone about what's about to happen, he said, this guy's trying to take food out of your children's mouths. Like, you are about to fight for money. This guy is trying to prevent you from getting paid. He's trying to take food out of the mouths of your children. And he said that when he said that, Floyd Mayweather's mentality changed. He ended up winning that fight. Sometimes we get a little too comfortable. Sometimes we have too many backup plans. Sometimes we don't realize that in these situations that we might be in, sometimes we need to go all in with no backup. Simon finds himself in a very similar situation. Simon finds himself, we're going to be in John chapter 6. Simon finds himself backed into the corner, the gloves are on, and he's forced to make this decision. Is there a plan B? To preface what happens, we're going to be in John chapter 6. We're going to be picking up in verse 60. But before we dive in, I want to kind of give the context of what's happening. Jesus has, not too long before this, just did the feeding of 4,000 people. Or 5,000. One of the big feedings that he does, that's what's just happened here. So if you're familiar with these feeding of the many thousands of people, because it's 4,000 to 5,000, not including women and children, those weren't included in the numbers. So we're talking lots and lots of people. Jesus has just performed a miracle. There's all of this, there's bread and there's fish. There's not a whole lot. And Jesus performs this miracle, and all of these many, many, many thousands of people are fed. These people, they watch, and they're like, man, this guy's awesome. Like, look at what he just did. He's incredible. I'll follow him anywhere. I'll go where Jesus goes. So what ends up happening is the disciples, they set off onto the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus walks on water. He walks on water out to the boat, and after this whole scene takes place, what ends up happening is they end up back on land, and the people who would follow Jesus anywhere, the people who had just seen this miracle, they're hungry again. And so they're like, Jesus, feed us. Jesus, why don't you do one of those cool miracle things again? And Jesus is like, look, you guys are coming to me not because you believe in who I am. You're coming to me because you just want to be fed. And Jesus has to give this quick little teaching about how he is the bread of life, and that if anybody eats of his flesh and drinks of his blood, they will never be hungry again. They will never be thirsty again. They will be fulfilled. And all of these people who were like, man, I'll follow him anywhere. They hear this teaching and they're like, what did he say? Did he just say that we have to eat his flesh and drink his blood? Did he say that that's actually going to fill us forever? Did he say that we're going to be fully satisfied if we do that? We're not allowed to eat people, are we? I don't know if I can really get behind everything that this guy says. And so all of these people who they're going to follow Jesus anywhere he goes, they start to leave. And that's where we find Simon in John chapter 6, verse 60. It says this, therefore, when many of his disciples heard this, they said, this teaching is hard. Who can accept it? Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples were grumbling about this, asked them, does this offend you? Then what if you were to observe the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? The Spirit is the one who gives life. The flesh doesn't help at all. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and are life. But there are some among you who don't believe. For Jesus knew from the beginning those who did not believe and the one who would betray him. He said, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted to him by the Father. From that moment, many of his disciples turned back and no longer accompanied him. So Jesus said to the 12, you don't want to go away too, do you? Simon Peter answered, Lord, to whom will we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God. Jesus replied to them, didn't I choose you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil. He was referring to Judas, Simon Iscariot's son, one of the 12, because he was going to betray him. Here we see two different kinds of mentalities. We see two different kinds of mentalities presented here. We see people with their backs against the wall who feel as if there's only two options. Do I keep the gloves on and do I keep fighting? Do I keep moving forward? Do I realize that there's only one plan, there's only one way, there's only one person who can save me? Or do I throw in the towel? Do I keep going forward or do I quit? And we have many of the disciples who were following, and for the record, disciples is not referring to the 12, it's just the people who had decided that they were going to follow him. It's all of these people who had just seen the miracles, and they were like, I'm down with Jesus, until he said this. Do we walk away or do we keep going? Simon represents the majority of the disciples. He's faced with this hard lesson that if he would just eat the flesh of Jesus, if he would just drink his blood, which we know refers to communion, it refers to the Eucharist, it refers to the broken body and the shed blood that is symbolized by communion. We know that now, but they didn't know this at the time. They just hear this hard teaching, and he says, "Are you going to leave too?" And Simon says, "Jesus, where else are we going? Where can we turn? Who else has the words of life? It's only you." But not Judas, right? Quick little spoiler, which, to be fair, John gives us the spoilers, so thanks a lot, John. He says that Judas is the one who's going to betray him. Jesus knows what's in the heart of Judas, and he says that I have chosen you 12, but one of you is a devil. One of you is the antagonist. One of you is an enemy. One of you is not like the rest. While the rest of you, you understand what I'm saying, and you get that there's nowhere else to turn. One of you thinks that there's a plan B. One of you thinks that there's something else you can do. One of you thinks that there's another Messiah who's going to come. One of you thinks that I am not enough, that I'm not who I say I am, that I don't have the words of life, that maybe it's somebody else. What's your plan? What's your plan? This is Thanksgiving. This is the Thanksgiving season, and it's the time where all of us, for the most part, we all gather, we're all having meals, and we're all remembering all of the ways that God has blessed us. What happens if it's gone? What happens if the house that you have, what happens if the roof that's over your head, what if it goes away? What if Uncle Sam comes to take it? What if you can't make your personal property taxes? What if your car ends up in a car accident? What happens if the food on your table suddenly turns to just bread and water? What if there's no meat at next Thanksgiving? What if there is no turkey? What if all of the things that we think about and we dwell on at Thanksgiving, what if it's not here next year? What's your plan? Where do you turn? These people that heard this teaching, they brought it upon themselves, and they said, there's always somebody else we can follow. There's plenty of rabbis that are going to teach that we can follow. I don't have to, lay my head on this rock. I've got a pillow back home. They all had safety nets. They all had plan Bs, but not Simon. He said, where else will we go? There's nobody else who has the words of life like you do. When you get into the book of Revelation, you see this phrase that pops up. It pops up twice, oddly enough. Well, not oddly enough. It's God-inspired and written by people who understand poetry and stuff like that, right? Chapter 1. You have this saying. It's something that God says. And he says, I am the Omega, or the Alpha, sorry, gosh. I'm done. Let's pray. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. It's chapter 1. Chapter 22, the last chapter of the book of Revelation, Jesus says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. I am the beginning and the end. I am the first and the last. I am A through Z. What's your plan? The point that I want to make is this. If we can go ahead and put it up. Jesus shouldn't be plan A. He should be plan A to Z. There shouldn't be Jesus' plan A, and if Jesus falls through, then at least I've got this. That's not the mentality that we should be having. Jesus is plan A, but he's also the safety net. Jesus is the only one who withstands the test of time. He was the first, he is the last, he was the beginning, he is the end, he is Alpha, he is Omega, he is A, he is Z, and everything in between. There is no backup plan with Jesus. And you want to know something scary? If you've got a backup plan, you're not in his plan A. That's what happened with Judas. That's what happens with the disciples who decide to leave him. What does he say? Those who are my sheep will know my voice. Those who recognize that I have the words of life, they're the ones who will be saved. Those who will eat my flesh and drink my blood, those are the ones who will be saved. Those who recognize that I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, and there is no way to the Father but through me, those people, they have found the way and they are the ones walking it. What is it else? That the path to salvation is narrow and the road to destruction is wide. If he is not your only plan, you're probably not in his. And I hate to say that. That's another hard lesson. That's another hard teaching. Because in the year of 2024, we don't like to say that people are excluded. We don't like to say that some people just don't make the cut. We don't like to say that somebody just doesn't get it. We like to give participation trophies to everybody. Another thing I never thought I'd say in a sermon, in the words of Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights, if you ain't first, you're last. That's the way it is with Jesus. If you're not walking with him, you ain't winning. I should probably start putting in applications to other churches. Something tells me I just ended my career. They're going to be like, time for the annual review. He brought up 50 Cent in a sermon and Ricky Bobby. That's a wrap. He's out. Only strike 2. Get ready for strike 3. I'm just kidding. Guys, it's the truth. The unfortunate reality, and there are days where I wish that it wasn't the case, but I don't make the rules. I'm not God. Not everybody makes the cut. And do you know what's awesome, though, about the fact that not everybody makes the cut? It's not based on what you do or what I do. It's not. You don't have to be good enough. I don't have to be good enough because Jesus already was good enough. Jesus died so that you can be saved. You take on his righteousness. It's not about how good you are or about how not good you are. But he has to be plan A through Z. There can't be any other options. There can't be any plan Bs. You want to know why? There's a word in the Bible that we use for that. It's called idolatry. If you've got a plan B, you got an idol. If you think that Jesus might not save you, but the money in your wallet will, you've got an idol. If you think that Jesus can't save you, but whatever elected politician might be able to spare you a little bit, you've got an idol. If you think that Jesus can't save you, but B, C, D might, you've got idols. Jesus can't just be plan A and there's others after. He's got to be plan A through Z. Let's pray. Dear Lord, I thank you for this day that you've given us. God, I thank you for your Son. I thank you for his death on the cross. God, as we approach Thanksgiving, as we think about all of the ways in which you've blessed us, God, I pray that we would never take our focus off of the biggest blessing that you gave, which was your Son and his sacrifice on a cross. God, I pray that if the things that we have this Thanksgiving are gone next Thanksgiving, God, I pray that we rest assured that the one thing that stays the same is your love. It's your grace. It's your mercy. God, I pray that we wouldn't be people who walk around with all of these extra plans. God, I pray that we would recognize that your plan is the only one. That yours is good enough, that it is perfect, that it is complete, and that your will is for us to follow it. God, I thank you for your Son. I thank you for all of the ways that you bless us. God, I pray that we would just follow you. That no matter how hard your lessons might be, we might accept them and walk in them because they're yours. God, we love you and we thank you. And it's in the name of your Son, Jesus, that we pray. Amen. As per usual, this is the time of invitation. This is also the last Sunday of the month, so the Building Fund offering is going to be passed around as we have our final song. But if you have any prayer requests, any praises that you would like to lift up, any decisions that you might like to make, this will be the time to do so. So if you feel God calling you, whether it's to give, whether it's to come forward, this will be the time to do so.